They watched a Russian Su-27 flanker climb out over the Black Sea, curving toward a lone American MQ-9 Reaper running its orbit. And they did. Nothing. No fighter escort, no dramatic radio challenge. Just a steady feed of data. The Russian pilot thought that silence meant hesitation. He was wrong. The Reaper was already being watched by satellites, ships, and airborne sensors, tracked as a single icon inside a larger battle space picture. Its mission was routine for this war. Persistent ISR, eyes on a coastline, collecting patterns and listening to emissions that didn't want to be heard. Unarmed. Slow, patient. A target if someone decided to make a point. The Su-27 came in fast, high, and theatrical. Transponder, dark. Maneuvering, aggressive. Altitude and closure rate chosen to be seen on every scope in the region. The plan was simple. Bully the drone, force it off station, then go home and brag about chasing off the Americans. Russian intercepts like this weren't new. In that airspace, near that war, they had become a pattern. Jets closing to unsafe distances, accidentally crossing flight paths, throwing a message without firing a shot. But this time, the world would get a lesson in how modern escalation works. From the Reaper's ground control station, everything looked calm. No human heart rate inside the aircraft, no fear. Just telemetry, engine health, attitude, data link quality. The drone kept flying the line it had been assigned to fly. The Su-27 slid closer, then close enough that the Reaper's camera caught the flanker's belly in sharp detail. Hard points, panels, rivets, and the grime of a jet that lived in salty air. The Russian pilot rolled inverted, showing off. A message for the lens. Then he did something else, something that looked like a stunt, but was actually a tactic. He dumped fuel. A wide, shimmering sheet of aviation fuel arced over the Reaper, spraying the airframe and washing across the prop. It wasn't a missile, it wasn't a gun run. It was a harassment move designed to disrupt the drone's sensors, to foul its systems, and to tell the operator on the other end, we can touch you whenever we want. The Reaper kept steady, course unchanged, altitude stable. The Americans did not turn away. They recorded, they time-stamped, they watched the pattern. And then the Su-27 came back for another pass. This time, it wasn't fuel. It was geometry. The flanker cut across the Reaper's nose at a distance so small that a single gust, a single wake vortex, a single tiny misjudgment could turn a flex into a disaster. That's the edge Russian pilots sometimes skate on. Controlled danger, the kind that looks like dominance until it becomes gravity. On the final pass, the misjudgment arrived. The Su-27's rear section clipped the Reaper's propeller. Not a full collision, not a dramatic mid-air fireball. A hard, sudden contact, metal into spinning composite, enough to tear blades, shake the drone, and send it into an immediate spiral. The feed jolted. The horizon snapped. Warnings lit up on the consoles. The prop was damaged. Control was degraded. The Reaper was no longer a stable aircraft. It was falling. In seconds, the decision shifted from mission to salvage. The operators fought for stability, but the airframe was compromised. There was no runway, no recovery. Only one option: deny the wreck. The Americans directed the Reaper down, not as a surrender, as a choice. The drone hit the Black Sea and disappeared beneath the surface. A multi-million-dollar asset gone in a minute. And the Russian pilot flew away thinking he'd scored a victory, but the real fight had already started, and it wasn't in the sky. Within hours, the United States released video. Not edited propaganda, not anonymous claims. A clear sequence showing the fuel dumps, the unsafe passes, and the moment the jet struck the prop. The message was surgical. You didn't scare us. You proved what you are willing to do. Russia responded with denial and spin, trying to frame it as the drone's fault, as if physics could be blamed on the victim. But the footage didn't care. The world had seen the geometry. And behind the public statements, the military side moved quietly. Because the Black Sea incident wasn't just a headline, it was a live test of rules, restraint, and response. The obvious question is this: if a $30 million drone can be bullied and knocked out of the air, what stops the same tactic from being used against something bigger, something with a crew, Something that triggers a different kind of decision? The answer is deterrence. And deterrence in 2025 is no longer a single fighter scrambling to escort and warn. It is a layered system: space, air, sea, cyber, wired into a single nervous system. The Reaper was slow, but it wasn't alone. The moment the first fuel dump happened, sensors across the region updated. Radar tracks fused, electronic signatures tagged, call signs matched to known units. Every turn the flanker made became data. Every burst of radar energy became a fingerprint. Every radio transmission, even if short, became a breadcrumb. That's the modern truth Russian pilots often ignore. You can intimidate an unmanned aircraft visually, but you cannot hide from the network while doing it. And the Su-27 had revealed more than aggression. It had revealed technique, how close the pilot was willing to fly, how he managed closure, how he used fuel as a tool, how his jet behaved in the wake of another aircraft. All of it was recorded, cataloged, and added to a growing dossier. For the Russians, the win was immediate and emotional. For the Americans, the harvest was long-term and strategic. Now, zoom out. The Black Sea is crowded with invisible lines, claimed zones, contested corridors, flight information regions that overlap with politics and war. When aircraft meet there, the rules are rarely about air safety. They are about messages. So what happens next time? Next time it isn't a drone. Next time it's a patrol aircraft like a P-8 or a rivet joint, a crude platform that cannot ditch itself to deny the wreck. Next time, a dangerous pass could kill people, and that's where the calculus changes. Because on paper, Russian fighters like the Su-27 and Su-35 are intimidating. High speed, strong kinematics, big missiles. They were built to sprint into a fight, fire, and escape. But intimidation only works if the other side accepts the frame. The US and its allies have been quietly changing the frame. Instead of reacting loudly, they react invisibly. Instead of a single escort, they build a box. Instead of a dogfight, they build a firing solution. And they do it before the Russian pilot even understands he has been targeted. Here's what that looks like. A crewed NATO aircraft is flying its mission in international airspace. A Russian fighter approaches. Transponder off, posture aggressive, making sure cameras can see the pass. The fighter believes speed and proximity are control. But above that scene, a stealth aircraft is already present, unseen. Below it, a ship is already listening. Farther back, an AWACS is already scanning. Data flows between them, constant and quiet. Tracks are shared. Threat libraries are updated. Engagement zones are calculated. The Russian jet finally makes its unsafe pass. And only then does the real warning arrive. Not as a radio call, but as a change in the electronics. A radar warning that wasn't there a second ago. A data link that suddenly feels crowded. A jamming tone that blooms like a curtain. Not to blind the Russian jet completely, just to remind the pilot that his aircraft exists inside someone else's envelope. If escalation continues, the next step is not a gun burst. It's a missile. Modern missiles do not care about your bravado. They care about energy and geometry. A missile like Meteor sustains thrust. It does not burn out and coast, it hunts. At altitude, where drag is low, it keeps speed. It keeps options, and it keeps pressure on the target late into the engagement. The Russian pilot might believe he can run. At high speed, he might even believe he can outpace the first seconds. But a sustained missile turns that belief into panic, because at those speeds, maneuvering is expensive. Every defensive turn bleeds energy. Every climb steals airspeed. And once the jet slows, it becomes exactly what it tried to avoid becoming: a trackable, killable target. Even a standard AIM-120D changes the math. Two-way data link, mid-course updates from other platforms. A shooter that does not need to keep its radar pointed at the target. You can be engaged by a fighter you never see, guided by an AWACS you never touch, based on a track built by sensors you never knew were there. That is what network warfare does. It turns a local encounter into a regional kill chain. The Black Sea incident showed the edge of this reality. A Russian pilot used physical harassment to force an outcome. The US accepted the loss of hardware rather than risk a worse escalation. Then it used information to win the narrative and refine the response. And quietly, policy hardens. Not announced in a press conference, not screamed on television. Written into rules and briefings and checklists, tighter intercept standards, sharper thresholds, less patience for unsafe games that can become fatalities. Because the next reckless pass might not hit a propeller, it might hit a wing, and it might hit a cockpit. And the difference between a drone splashing into the sea and a crewed aircraft going down is the difference between embarrassment and war. So the lesson isn't a drone got rammed. The lesson is this: the era of cost-free harassment is ending. Not because of emotion, but because of systems. Russia can still send fighters. It can still fly close. It can still try to create viral footage for domestic audiences. But every pass is data. Every stunt is a signature. Every message becomes a target folder. And in a battle space ruled by networks, the side that learns faster wins sooner. The Reaper sank. The flanker returned home. No missiles flew, no shots were fired. And yet, the incident changed the temperature of the air because it proved something simple. When two forces meet at the edge of a war, even a non-lethal stunt can become a strategic event. Next time, the silence might not mean restraint. Next time, it might mean the lock has already happened. We also know what happened after the splash. The United States said it took steps to protect sensitive equipment. Because the Reaper wasn't just a camera with wings. It carried encrypted links, mission computers, and sensor packages built to survive electronic attack. Russia hinted it would try to recover the wreck. American officials said the drone was flying in international airspace and that the intercept was unsafe and unprofessional. Then U.S. naval units moved, quietly, because a sunken aircraft is still an intelligence problem. If the wreck comes up, every circuit board becomes a question. How is the data link hardened? What frequencies does it favor? How are keys stored? What firmware lives inside the payloads? Even partial recovery can matter. So denial isn't only about sinking the airframe, it's about degrading what sinks with it. That's why ditch procedures exist. Operators can wipe components, scrub storage, disable certain modules. They can't make the sea erase everything, but they can make recovery slower, riskier, and less profitable. And that brings us to the part viewers miss. The collision was physical, but the contest was electronic. So when the Su-27 clipped the prop, it wasn't a scratch. It was a critical hit to a system designed for endurance, not impact. That's why the Reaper didn't limp home. It fell out of a stable envelope. Now look at the Russian choice. A fighter pilot has options. He can fly alongside and signal. He can keep distance and observe. He can call on radio and claim a safety narrative. Instead, he chose proximity and contact. That reveals intent. And intent matters in deterrence because intent changes response thresholds. The strategic risk wasn't the drone. It was precedent. If you normalize ramming unmanned aircraft, the next step is tempting. Ram a patrol aircraft's sensors, clip a wingtip, force an emergency descent. And if a crewed aircraft goes down, the politics ignite. That's why incidents like this get briefed at the highest levels. Not because of a drone, because of the escalatory ladder it points to. So NATO's answer is evolving. Not with press releases, with posture. More persistent patrols, more layered coverage, more aircraft whose job is not to be seen. More fighters trained to fight through jamming and confusion. More networking between nations that used to operate in separate lanes. That matters because Russian tactics rely on ambiguity. A close pass that can be called unsafe, not hostile. A fuel dump that can be called harassment, not attack. A bump that can be called accidental, not deliberate. Ambiguity buys room. Room buys repeat behavior. Repeat behavior buys normalization. Networks remove that room because networks record. They capture radar waveforms. They capture comms discipline. They capture the timing of a pilot's maneuvers. They capture which sensors turn on and when. They capture the subtle stuff. The things a pilot can't hide when he's performing for a camera. And once those signatures exist, counters follow. You can jam selectively, you can spoof. You can force a fighter to question his own radar picture. You can deny him the easy confidence that makes reckless passes feel safe. You can also position weapons in a way that ends the game fast. A Russian fighter can sprint, but it still has to respect missile kinematics. A long-range missile doesn't need to win a turn fight. It needs one clean solution. and a network can create that solution without drama. That's why Russian pilots sometimes look for drones. Drones can't shoot back. Drones can't turn into a dogfight. Drones can be pushed until something breaks. But the moment you treat drones as expendable, you invite the other side to treat your tactics as measurable. And measured tactics become solvable. Tap to watch for more.